Welcome to week 5. I hope you're doing well. I'm going to make this lecture as quick and painless as easy. I'm just going to be talking a little bit about rhetorical situation, about audience, and why it's important to recognize audience and how people are crafting arguments. And that's kind of what this week's readings go into. So hopefully you have done them, and I'm just going to give you a little bit more insight so that maybe you can have a little bit more insight into your discussion posts for this week. Just so you can play with them a little bit more and you can remember these concepts later because our next essay, our next major assignment is going to be more about breaking down the actual construction of an argument and why the author made some choices um, in building or crafting their argument. So yeah, before we begin, I just want to say all of your papers are in. If you are not liking your grade on your essay, please, please, please don't freak out. I will talk about the possibility of you being able to make up this assignment at the end of the semester. You will have to meet certain criteria, and I will address that later on. But like I said, don't freak out yet. That's nothing you need to freak out about. Because I uploaded the, I'm still mad at myself about this. I uploaded the lecture that I posted last week up late, I guess. I unpublished it somehow. And so, because of that, I have given you all 5 points extra credit on your essay. Um, it is up under week 4 if you do want to watch it. It just mostly goes into MLA and some things on how to basically format that if you had any questions. So, yeah, like I said, please don't be worried. Yeah, this week's pretty easy, right? We have our discussion posts and journal that are due. And I grade about 5 essays a day. So that's my goal at least, because otherwise I become overwhelmed. So yeah, you will get your essays graded probably by next week, because there's not that many students in this class at least. So yeah, we're gonna just get straight into it. So what we're gonna be talking about is more about the rhetorical situation or how it's important to interact with audience and how to kind of identify that. So I pulled up a sample opinion piece off of CNN that I'm just going to break down really fast for you. And we're just going to be talking about basically who the audience is and what choices the author did to kind of persuade their audience, right? Because as you will see in the readings, it is very important that every single argument that is created, there is an audience in mind. If you don't have an intention or a purpose or know who you're trying to actually persuade, your argument will fail. Otherwise, you'll be arguing into the air, right? For instance, you can say like, and you'll see like your pieces that you'll have for your discussion post. Like I'm asking for you to write asking for financial help from your parents um, is different versus asking the bank, right? There are different choices you have to use, different language you have to use, etc. Um, and then that's kind of what we're talking about this week, and more of our later assignments is what we're going to be doing. So for this piece, and I'm just going to run down it really quick. Like I said, I don't want you to spend a lot of time on this because we're going to be doing a lot of examples throughout the semester. And I'm going to be asking a lot more of the same questions, similar, but they're going to keep building. So, for instance, we have this article. It's from CNN, and the title is Hey, Wear the Damn Mask. So, if I asked you who the audience of this is, what would you say? That's kind of difficult, right? But immediately we would say it's from CNN. So obviously there's a demographic of people who go to CNN and they read their articles, right? And who is CNN's audience, right? We'd probably say it's middle to upper, social middle class, I guess. We would say that they are more liberal. I would assume so, right? I don't know. What else could we say about them? People who are interested in politics, we can say that. People who what else? What else would they say about people who go to CNN? They'd probably be more liberal both with politics but also with religious views. Demographics, I would probably say they're in their 30s, maybe 40s, 50s is probably a demographic, right? I don't think this is geared towards teens. Although this example, Kristen Bell, maybe. But yeah, so that would be like a breakdown of the demographic. So we're getting it more specific and specific and specific, right? As we keep breaking it down. And that's kind of what you want to notice in this. Any argument you encounter is how specific is it? Is it more general, or is it very, very, very targeted to a specific group? And you will see that it depends on your intention. This one is supposed to be targeted to people who are on CNN, right? And who are part of this audience. So let's go and see what choices she makes to kind of persuade the audience she has in mind. So there's just a few things that I want to point out. So for instance, she uses the word you in here, and she also uses the word we. So what she does there is when an author uses you or with we, she tries to implicate the reader. She tries to say, I am like you are like me. And this is important for you to notice because the point of view or the language that is used intentionally to prove a point. And whenever you see those moments, those we's, these you's, they should be a like click in your head, and you'd be like, I see what this author is trying to do. They're trying to implicate me. They're trying to like make our values seem similar, even if they're not. And so it's always important for you to see that because that is an intentional choice. It's an argumentative choice, right? So she uses the CDC as an example. She uses her experience working, and I'm just going through this. Like I can post this for y'all if y'all want to go through this. But she also uses her experience working at an HIV/AIDS clinic during the AIDS crisis. She brings up vaccines for children, and I think those are the major points. And she doesn't really talk about anything qualms that people have with masks, besides them being like really cumbersome and hot and uncomfortable. Oh, and she uses very, very in your face language. So she says like, wear the damn mask. Like that's the title of the article, right? That's an in your face point. And then she also says right here that nurses and doctors are facing unspeakable pain. Like these kind of word choices are really implicating, right? They're trying to give that pathos. They're trying to make audiences relate to that, to say like, think of the harrowing things that doctors and nurses are experiencing. Think of them, right? She's trying to do that. And she's doing this intentionally because she knows that the audience are people who can buy into this, right? And it's important, like I said, to look at the kind of examples that she's making because they're intentional and they're trying to persuade her specific audience. So the CDC is one of her first points that she brings up. So immediately, her audience that she's targeting, she believes that they trust in this entity and to trust this information, right? Now, when you think about all the things that are happening right now, and a lot of people are questioning the CDC and not buying the information, like this wouldn't work for a different audience, correct? Like if she brought this up, people would immediately, it'd be a red flag. But because she knows that her audience trusts in this, because again, it is CNN, right? She knows that they believe in the scientific research from this company, right? Then she has no problem presenting this as an example. And again, she has no problem with bringing up her experience working at HIV/AIDS social work during the AIDS crisis, which could be a polarizing just topic for other groups, right? Some people think, HIV/AIDS is God's punishment for people being sinners, etc. So that might not be like a great example to bring up if her audience was someone else. But because she knows her audience is more liberal, etc., and trusts more in the ethos of the government, then she brings up the CDC and she brings up that experience. And we can see her framing her argument that way, right? And she knows that people are empathetic towards things that are occurring around the country. So that is also probably one of the audience points. If like we had to make a list, she would also be targeting people who are empathetic, because a lot of her argument is about empathy and about what is occurring to like doctors, etc. So let's see. So it's really important. Do you see these choices that she's making? She knows who her audience is. The examples that she's using is specific towards that audience, and the language choice also, which is in your face, etc., also matches her audience, because she already knows that these people believe in her stance, right? And she can use more jarring language because she knows it won't make them stop reading, because they already know this. They already feel that anger, etc. So that's why she can use this language, and she uses it like, again, wear the damn mask and unspeakable, etc. And she also says we, because she knows that they already agree with her. So those are points that she's using, and that's how she's framing her argument, because she already knows the audience will buy into it, right? And we can go through more of this, and if we went to the nuances, then we would know, right? Okay, she did this because of that. But do you see how it's so important for the audience that you have in mind, that it's very specific, you write it out, you know who it is, because all of the choices that you make to convince your audience has to be geared towards persuading that specific audience. And like I said, like we have our assignments, right, for your discussion post. What you're going to say to your parents versus what you're going to say to the bank, for instance, are completely two different things. What language you use, how you dress, the presentation, what kind of information you have to present has to be completely different. Otherwise, the audiences won't buy into what you're saying. So for instance, if she had this article and this was published on Fox News or some anti mask website, etc., and she brings up the CDC, immediately audiences would not like this. If she had, because they're questioning the government, etc., right? And immediately this information might be more polarizing. So these are choices that she made with her specific audience in mind, but outside of this audience, it wouldn't be effective. And that's where we come into, like, whenever you examine something, you have to think of like, who's the audience for, right? And then who's the secondary audience? For her, the secondary audience is people who are maybe questioning whether or not they should wear a mask. And I don't know if her article is really that effective in getting people who are questioning, because she's saying wear the damn mask. I think that it's already a polarizing title and a sentence, so that might not persuade everyone, right? And then her saying we and etc., she's not really doing a good job at allowing other people to explore that, right? And she's not really talking about the logos of the argument. She only has like a one moment in here that she does. And so you would know that this is not persuasive to people outside of her community. So this would not be a great article for that. But that's really important. And it's also really important to recognize the constraints of any type of argument. This is an opinion piece, right? I'm assuming this is less than 1,000 words. Not many people like to read long articles, right? So she has constraints of this being an article. It has to keep people's attention. It has to be under a certain amount of words. It has to get straight to the point. She doesn't use a lot of information or a lot of science, etc., because she already knows her audience believes in the effectiveness of masks, etc., right? If she had more of a questioning audience that she was targeting, then maybe she would bring up more evidence of science, and she would bring up more evidence of the logos of what wearing a mask versus not wearing a mask is. But because she already knows who the audience is, she didn't go into that. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. But these are things that you have to start recognizing, and you will have to be playing around with more, especially for your next major paper, because we have to know who the audience is, and we have to know why that specific author, video creator, whatever we're going to be looking at, right? Use these choices. Why did she use this language? Why did she use this example? Why did she use this specific quote from whatever? Why did she use this personal narrative? These are all really important because ultimately they bring up questions about the effectiveness of the argument. And some authors we will encounter will make choices that are not probably the smartest or not the most effective. And yeah, and so that's just something for you to be aware of. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight into audience and intention and how ethos, pathos, and logos are working, right? Because we need to examine them. We need to be able to examine ethos, pathos, and logos and how other people are forming their arguments so that we ourselves can create arguments that use ethos, pathos, and logos well and effective. And in order to do that, we have to look at audience, we have to look at constraints, we have to look at the genre, right? This is an opinion piece, right? So the language can be more lax versus if this was more of a scientific article, this would be way different, right? So the genre conventions are very different. If this was a YouTube video, the language would be different also, right? So these are all things that you have to keep in mind and you have to juggle with and play with every time you encounter something and every time you form your own argument. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight. Like I said, I wanted this to be really fast. And I'm sorry if maybe I rambled, I don't know. Yeah, so I wanted to give some more insight so that you can really try to interact with the discussion posts that you have. And so that this could relate a lot with the readings that you have for this week. Yeah, so hopefully this doesn't bore y'all and my voice isn't too jarring. Like I said, all of your stuff is up for week 5. I'm grading your essays. You have extra credit that I'm applying. Get those discussion posts and journal in. Yeah, have a good day. I'm on Remind if you have any questions.